Well, hello everybody, how are you doing? It's time for our Friday on Ian Wygath, and today we're going to have a look at a part of Route 66. As you know, I'm a Route 66 buff, fan, whatever you want to call me, and I know a lot of you enjoy it as well. It is America's Mother Road. It's probably one of the most famous highways in the world, and has a lot of interesting places to see and great stories to share. So today we're going to look at a part of Route 66 in Oklahoma. Let's get to it. Nowhere is Route 66 more at home than in Oklahoma, where the pavement follows the contours of the land as though it had always been there. In Oklahoma, the west and east collide on Route 66, and the state becomes the crossroads for America's Main Street. In a way, Route 66 was born in Oklahoma, home of Cyrus Avery, Lon Scott, Andy Payne, Jack Cutbirth, Will Rogers, and many others who inspired the growth of the highway. In 1926, when word of the new U.S. Route 66 got out, Oklahoma was celebrating its 19th anniversary as a state, and Woody Guthrie, then a scrawny 14-year-old, had already outgrown those Oklahoma hills where he was born. Route 66 was big news in Oklahoma. All along the highway, which linked the industrial states of the east with the golden plains of the west, Oklahomans watched as the new culture emerged, complete with hitchhikers, Burma shave signs, and neon lights. It took several more years to connect the bits and pieces, but before too long the highway reached across the land, racing through time and history, following old trails blazed by explorers and adventurers. The path through Oklahoma emerged from the trails worn in the prairie and slashed through triangles of blackjack and mesquite. The highway begins its descent into the northeastern part of Oklahoma at the Kansas line and slashes southwest through Old Indian Territory, past Tulsa and Oklahoma City, the state's two largest cities, then proceeds westward to the Texas Panhandle. In the 1930s, Route 66 became the road of desperation described so poignantly by John Steinbeck in The Grapes of Wrath. As the brutal Dust Bowl years arrived, many of those Oklahoma refugees, or Okies, struck out on Route 66 in single cars or caravans, carrying all their furniture, kids, hopes, and dreams with them. Sometimes only humor kept folks sane. According to the common folk wisdom, a car with 3 mattresses strapped to the roof meant a family of rich Okies. 2 mattresses meant mediocre wealth, and a lone mattress meant the Okies inside were dirt poor. Some officials estimated that as many as 1/3 Okies, or 15% of the population, fled the choking dust storms and took Route 66 to California. Those tragic years of the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl left deep scars on the land and emotional wounds on the people along the highway. In the early 1930s, the rain stopped and did not come again for years. The timing was horrendous. The century's worst drought arrived to accompany the century's worst depression. In 1925, wheat sold for $1.16 a bushel. In 1931, the price dropped to 33 cents. Banks foreclosed, and families moved on. Parts of Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas, New Mexico, and several Midwestern states looked like the landscape of the moon. Years of drought and outdated farming methods turned the land into a desert of sand and pale dirt. The sky was a choking sea of dust. Giant, dark dust clouds swept away the topsoil. Folks wrapped wet neckerchiefs around their faces and crammed newspapers and pages ripped from old catalogs under the doors and around the windows to keep the powder-fine dust from seeping in. It did little good. Dust covered everything and coated the lungs of people and livestock. Some dust storms lasted 72 hours straight with no let-up. Schools closed, and cars, trucks, and trains sat still. People died from dust pneumonia. Flocks of geese, blinded by the swirling storms, crashed into the ground. Cattle by the thousands died of thirst. Derricks were used no longer to drill for oil, but water. Route 66 became a road of safe passage to what the Dust Bowlers prayed would be a better way of life. Steinbeck described the highway this way, quote, "Highway 66 is the main migrant road. 66, the long concrete path across the country, waving gently up and down on the map, from the Mississippi to Bakersfield, over the red lands and the gray lands, twisting up into the mountains, crossing the divide and down into the bright and terrible desert, and across the desert to the mountains again, and into the rich California valleys." For many Oklahomans, any memories of the Dust Bowl era, including Steinbeck's prose and Guthrie's ballads, are best forgotten. Many of them are apt to wince at the mere mention of the word Okie. To them, the words Okie, Dust Bowl, and Route 66 are phrases from the past. Interdispersal loops, cloverleafs, turnpikes, and interstates are much preferable. "Everybody talks about Okies, those folks who packed it all up and went on down the road," says an old farmer who left Oklahoma only long enough to serve a hitch in the army. "I'd like to know about the ones who stayed and spit in the dust and stuck it out. They were the tough ones. They were the real Oklahomans. Or the ones who did leave and build new lives. Some of them even came back. What about them? There's nothing wrong with being called an Okie. That should be a name of pride, not a brand of shame." Besides serving as an escape route for the migrants, Route 66 in Oklahoma carried more than its fair share of vagabonds and poets, servicemen heading to and from war, truckloads of commerce, and of course an endless stream of tourists. It was this wave of tourists headed to the Painted Desert or the Grand Canyon that helped romanticize Route 66. They motored along listening to a series of warblers croon about getting their kicks on Route 66. In the post-war years, Route 66 became the nation's most popular highway. It was the evocative symbol of freedom, fun, and escape. Americans took to it in droves. The route was heavily traveled all year long, but the main season was summer, when schools let out. On some portions of Route 66 in Oklahoma during those busy summer months, traffic was so thick it was difficult to cross the road. Highway towns in Oklahoma thrived on the revenue. At the height of its popularity, Route 66, especially in Oklahoma, signaled the age of the hamburger stand, filling station, and motor court with refrigerated air. Tourists got no wake-up calls because there were no telephones in the cabins. But most desk clerks worth their salt had a stash of alarm clocks behind the counter to lend to their customers. The tourists tried to stop at the cafes where they spied the trucks, knowing well that legions of truckers hauling oranges and beefsteaks always dined where the gravy was the tastiest and the biscuits were the lightest. These authentic cafes can still be found in some areas of Oklahoma. They still turn out homemade pies, thick hand-patted hamburgers, real milkshakes, and there's nothing instant except the service. In Oklahoma, there are still garish postcards to buy and joints where patrons are serenaded by jukebox tunes. There are still people who consider time important. They take time to chat with a trucker or a waitress. Take time to watch a hawk sail across the summer sky. Take time to pull off the road for a skinny dip in a shady creek. Even though folks are singing new songs and driving new highways, and the old road has been nudged aside by the interstate, America's Main Street in Oklahoma continues as a vital frontage road, a business loop, an alternative for those people who aren't particularly anxious to go lickety-split. Remnants of the proud highway can be found from one end of the state to the other. Route 66 also cuts directly through the prime marketing territory of the Phillips Petroleum Company, founded in 1917 by oil tycoon Frank Phillips. Coincidentally, almost every major Midwestern city on the Phillips Petroleum marketing list happened to be located on the highway. Eager to find a suitable name for the new gasoline, Phillips finally settled the question of the company trademark on the eve of an executive committee meeting in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. In 1927, returning to Bartlesville from Oklahoma City, John Kane, one of Phillips Petroleum's top executives, was in a company car driven by Salty Sawtell. The tank was filled with the company's new gasoline. As the men sped toward Tulsa on Route 66, Kane noticed how fast they were traveling. "This car goes like 60 with our new gas," said Kane. "60 nothing," answered Sawtell. "We're doing 66. The men looked at each other, grinned. Going 66 on Route 66, that was the sign they were looking for. They already knew the new fuel was in the gravity range of 66, an especially high gravity mark. Now that they'd had this experience on the new Oklahoma highway, it seemed that 66 was destined to be the name. When Kane reported the news to Frank Phillips, it was all the colorful oil tycoon needed to hear. Before long, Phillips 66 gasoline was selling across America. Although the original Phillips logo started out on the disc-shaped signs, the company by 1930 was using the familiar six-pointed shield that resembled a national highway sign. The Phillips Petroleum shield had been altered somewhat during the years, but the Phillips 66 signs still dot much of the old road and many of the interstates and turnpikes. "Oklahoma is where it's at as far as Route 66 goes," says Terrence Moore, a southwestern photographer raised in a California orange grove right next to Route 66. "I traveled and photographed the length of the old highway most of my life. I found that Oklahoma is the central state on that route and the heart of the road. Then there are connections, the Grapes of Wrath, Phillips 66, the Will Rogers name, that link the road geographically and historically to the state. But the main thing is that Route 66 in Oklahoma means you are in the West." So there you have it, a little bit about Route 66 in Oklahoma. Hope you have enjoyed today's little tour down Route 66 and history lesson. And we'll see you on Tuesday for Tuesdays with the Pilgrim. And next Friday, when Glennis will be our guest chef, making her well-loved potato and ham. Join us next Friday when Glennis will be our guest chef, and she'll be making her cheesy potato and ham casserole. So be sure to join us and don't miss out on that one. Until then, take care, stay safe.